Committee of the Whole meeting on September 15th. As requested by members of council, we're trying to do this in a slightly different setting than normal to see how this works for us. And we have to share the mics though, because it does have to be recorded, so we'll switch back and forth depending on when somebody needs one. With that, I'll just ask for a motion to approve the agenda. We've got quite a bit of stuff to sort of talk about here. Councillor Valerian, second. Councillor Sanjanko. All in favor then? And that's carried. Any inquiries before we get going? Okay. So the strategic plan is sort of back up here for discussion. Manny, do you have some comments on that first?
The plan that you have in front of you as it stands was, as we last left, or I think in July, when we last discussed it. You can just at that comment, you can tell it's been a while. It's been a bit of a frustrating process to which never seems to wrap it up. And what I mean there is, so from the perspective of having a finished plan that we can report to the community and then report on the actions and the status of that. It'd be nice to have some form of closure, recognizing that it is the first year of a 4-year term, and that you might want to have a more in-depth discussion on it ahead of the next 3 years. So also want to recognize that there's been some feedback from councillors, including Councillor White. So we didn't make those changes ahead of this meeting, and I'm hoping we can sort of go through that process today, and ideally walk out of here with something we can all live with, and yeah.
Okay. So this was also brought up at this time, Councillor Sanjanko Park, and your request by email to get this back on the agenda as well. And Councillor White, I understand that you sort of gone through with some, looking at some changes to make, not necessarily content. The issue there is that the changes need to sort of move forward from committee, so we can go through those today if you want, and just generally we'll open this up to any comments or discussions at all of the time. So.
Well, I recall most of them, maybe this is it here. I didn't know that would be something we need to do. Go back to the document I already sent in. So I don't have it handy here. I can't seem to access it, but I just went through and found a couple typos. Really, I thought a few typos, and I made it. I asked if maybe the items on the back, the action items, couldn't be reordered, but that's not a big deal. Just thought that.
Sorry, reordered, you mean in terms of?
I had some questions about some of them too.
Okay.
I mean, whether, for example, whether we were actually completing some of these in 2015.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Okay, members go to Councillor Sanjanko.
I just add a comment to that. I think my interest of bringing it back onto the agenda was not really about the content of the document so much as I'd like as a council for us to take a look at and say, okay, realistically by the end of 2015, what are our top priorities and which are looking more like 2016. So I wondered if it would be helpful today to just quickly, go through some of these items and get a bit of agreement. Maybe it is around prioritization and where we're at with some of these items.
Did you have a comment there, man?
Certainly, we could certainly provide an update on the status of all of these action items. I'll note also that aside from that, what's in here, the department's quarterly reports contain some updates on some of these individual items, but this is sort of the concise version that we're using for the purposes of the strategic plan. So I'd be more than prepared to go over each one and see if there's specific questions or just knowing that they've either been started or are completed. And so is that, Council, what you were perhaps suggesting?
I think what we wanted, thanks Manny, is that just to like, I think if we get to a point where we say, this is our strategic plan,
Yeah.
instead of going over all these items, because I think that's what, when I said it, or in an email, I guess, that's what I wanted to get to, like, hey, this is our strategic plan. And then, of course, after that, then we could go over item. I don't know if vote today is going over item by item. I don't know if that does us any good if we're not convinced that this is our strategic plan.
Okay, so I guess based on that comment, and on my hearing that there's some question about whether things should even be in here, is that, Councillor Lumley, is that what you're?
Well, I wasn't looking forward to an update on these things.
I didn't want an update on them. I just wanted to make sure that that's what we were looking for. I mean, we can update them at a point for sure, but are these the items that we're focusing on as our strategic plan? That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you.
Just for a refresher, these items are the items that came out of the budget discussions as approved by council. And so they're by default, they've got action associated with it and they're being undertaken by staff.
Okay. All right, Councillor White and Councillor Sanhenko.
So this connects, I mean, the conversation we're having right now connects to the motions I've put forward about making strategic plan an ongoing discussion at committee of the whole. So I think it's probably a relevant time to talk about that too, or if there's a different way of doing it.
No, that's fine.
Especially when we're talking about the action items here, the initiatives, we do have quarterly reports, which staff puts a lot of time into compiling for us, and yet currently they go onto the website, and I think they are accessible to the public, which is great, but they never actually come before council for any kind of discussion or questions or in our agendas. So that's why one of my motions was suggesting that the quarterly reports could come to a committee of the whole. So then, for one thing, there'd be a little more publicity to them. Yeah, that people would know, the public would be able to see that some of the initiatives in our budget and strategic plan are getting done or may not be getting done for reasons, and council could ask questions. So that was the thinking behind that. So I think that connects to this discussion about how we keep up on our initiatives.
Okay, so maybe I'll just ask if there's any comments or on that particular thing. Not really at this point. Okay, nothing. Nobody sees any issues with that. Oh, sorry, over there,
Certainly, so the next quarterly report will be available at the end of the second week of October, towards that, which will encompass September, August, and July. And at that time, to add that to our committee of the whole, our second CAL meeting in October, it's easily done if that's the wish of council.
Okay, so just maybe leave that to be dealt with on the motion tonight.
Sure. Yeah.
So we've talked about that. Okay. All right.
Can I just get some clarification? So the reports that we currently post to the website are quarterly department reports. So those are operational reports that talk about how many services were changed out, and that kind of operational work in each of the departments. Then there's the quarterly strategic plan update reports. Those normally would come to a committee of the whole meeting. They haven't this year because we haven't had a strategic plan to report on. So I just want to get clarification, which report is it that we're wanting on the agendas? The operational reports are very day-to-day operations in nature. They're not going to report on your strategic plan items per se.
But we're good.
Okay, so, Councillor White, the motion that you've got on the agenda for tonight does deal with the quarterly operational
Departmental
reports.
reports, absolutely, because yeah, I mean, it's I wasn't even aware that there were quarterly strategic plan reports, so that's the first time I've heard of that, but it's because we don't have them.
We haven't had one because we haven't had a strategic plan to report back on.
But I think the operational reports, I mean, I've read them, and they do take in a lot of these initiatives that were in our budget, and you know, pavement improvements and sidewalks and things, you know, work that's being done in the town. So I think that's relevant.
Okay, so at this point, the motion that Councillor White has for tonight is for those operational reports, the ones that go up on the website, so. We'll, I guess, deal with quarterly strategic plan reports at another point. Okay, all right, so that's fine. Well, I don't know, there's some specific topics you wanted to talk about here.
Yeah, I guess my wanting to kind of just do a quick snapshot is maybe because I've got a particular interest to talk about public engagement under number 6, and wanting to, because we haven't had a strategic plan update yet, just wanting to discuss with my fellow council the idea of starting some creative community strategic conversations. And I've talked with a couple of you individually, so again, if this is a good time to kind of bring that forward and share a couple of ideas and get some feedback, then I'll fly at her, but if it's not, then I can also hold off.
I'll just hear from Councillor Valeria first.
Okay, I'm still confused. Do we have a strategic plan? Have we signed off on this strategic plan? No. So I don't know how we're going to start discussing things on the strategic plan if we don't have one yet. So my message to you guys was, can we just finalize our strategic plan so then we can have these types of conversations and debates that directly are attributed to the strategic plan. But right now, we don't have one. So,
Okay.
I mean, I'd just like to finalize it so that we can work on it and work on all the points. That's all. Am I making sense, or am I not making sense? Because we have not released a strategic plan yet, right? Yeah, we haven't endorsed it. So I'd like to get to that point before we start discussing all the points within it, right?
Okay, Councillor Valeria.
Yeah, I think if there are any proposed edits to this wording, let's deal with them now. I heard some mention of if we don't think we're going to finish it in 2015, it shouldn't be in here. My inclination is there's still 3.5 months left. If we don't get it in 2015, then we'll roll it over to 2016. But I read this. Maybe there's a couple of typos, but otherwise, text looks good. If there's proposed edits, let's get on with them and get it done.
All right, so I guess that's the question then. Are there changes to what's sitting here in front of us right now that members of council wish to see? Councillor White?
Yeah, I prefer not to bring up typos at committee or council meetings. It's better just to email staff about them, which is what I did before, but I guess that's what we have to do. So, sustainable asset management, the third point, it seems to be missing.
Yeah, it's in a
line
box
or
that's
two.
expanded down.
Yeah,
I did just
so-
notice that the text is there,
So
but
that's,
you can't see
yeah,
it.
yeah, it's been
Yeah.
just been cut off.
We
But
did notice that.
obviously, in our final version, we'll need to see how that sentence ends, I guess.
Okay, sorry, so that's the expanding safe pedestrians, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
expanded
must say
safe
networks or
pedestrian
something, I don't
walkway
know.
and
Bicycle networks, yeah.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
That it's missing one more line on that, the actual document.
Okay, so does anybody know what the line is?
And bicycle networks, I believe
Yeah.
is what it said.
And bicycle networks? Okay. Keep going down.
And another type there, it says mobilization somewhere. I don't know where that is. Oh, number 13. Prepare a background document to support community engagement. Mobilization, it should say.
I'll take out the old map, but okay. Yep, thank you.
I guess there should be a comma after education too, to separate those ends. Yeah, otherwise, I just suggested some rewording and things. It's really not that important. Things
Okay.
like
All right.
electronic management solution is that it's not the most exciting initiative, I guess.
So
Where
which,
people understand, we could just say electronic meetings, but
which one do you look, oh, it's kind of.
it's kind of splitting hairs at this point, so.
Electronic meeting management solution.
Yeah,
Yes, you have comments, Liam?
Yeah, I think when I explained back in the budget process that it was much more than just an electronic meeting solution. It
Mhm.
manages the meetings right through to actions, follow-ups. Staff reports are generated through that module. And then it has the public civic web portal, so just calling it an electronic meeting solution, we felt didn't encompass it. I believe that was based on council feedback. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Valeria?
See how the microphone picks up?
I must insist on number 5 that Gibson's gets a capital G
Yeah, that's
Lower
Gibson's.
for symbolic and grammatical reasons, but question under number 4. Harvest Beach Green Shores friendly design, is that still with even with sea level rise, is Green Shores still the kind of accepted best practice, or are we worried, are we concerned about being a little bit out of date there?
Not concerned about being out of date. Right now, working with Diane Sanford and engineering department, KWL, to try and bring some more funds onto that project, but you'll see action relatively shortly on the engineering of that failing retaining wall there, as an example.
Councilor Valeria, can you expand on, when you talk about Green Shores being out of date, is there something?
No, I'm not an expert. I mean, I know Manny knows all about it. I just wanted to check. I mean, Green Shores was kind of very, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just kind of very soft, less riprap retaining walls and more natural design, basically taking the engineers out of it and putting the biologists in. But with sea level rise, I just wonder if that, I mean, we've got sea level rise factored in on a bunch of things coming up, but just concerned that we, 2 meters of sea level rise, that softscaping, or that's whatever you want to call it, doesn't protect our assets or properties in the way that it should, which is a bit of a sad state if we have to put riprap walls everywhere, but it may become a reality.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Just one.
Councilor Sanjanko?
Sorry, just one more to add. Actually, in number 5, what I picked up was, rather than Lower Gibsons, I think we are just using Gibson's Landing now.
Oh, no. I still have one then.
Okay, so number 5, you said that should read support Gibson's Landing Market, is that what you're saying?
No, support Gibson's Market in becoming a community hub in Gibson's Landing, or for Gibsons.
I'm going to bring something else up here, another option. if that's-
On the same
Yeah,
note?
yeah, on the
Yeah,
same.
okay.
I think the market is increasingly trying to promote themselves, and we're supporting them as a community hub for the whole Sunshine Coast. So I would actually suggest that it just say a community hub for the Sunshine Coast.
I'd be inclined to agree with that,
Yeah.
for the reasons that you've just made there. So support the Gibson's Market becoming a community hub for the Sunshine Coast. Okay. Anything else that's jumped out at anyone? Yes, Councilor White?
I wonder, for the public engagement, we've got an initiative, number 6, public engagement, and then number 1, the community engagement policy and toolkit, and I'm wondering how to distinguish the two, yeah.
So the number 5, and the item, the public engagement piece, under number 6, it's more related to the initiative that Councilor Sanjanko wants to speak about, and she's had some conversations with you. She'll expand some more on that. The difference between that and number one, the number one, it's more of a staff document which provides direction for how to engage with the community depending on what type of meeting that we have. I mean, it's based on the principles of public participation, and it's quite a sizable resource that we presently don't have. I've got a draft of it right now, and on the front end of it, there's some principles of engagement, including the possibility, when I bring that forward to council to consider, discussing having a dialogue charter which sets some principles on how do you want to engage with the community, which I think provide more clarity into. So the two actions are complementary, and number 6, it's more of a council-led initiative, and number 1 is more of a in-house document to support public engagement initiatives.
Okay. All right. We might be getting close to where you want to get to, Councillor Lumley.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, there's going to still be some minor changes maybe when it comes back, but otherwise, unless there's something here that is here that you really feel is just should not be there at all at this point, or if there's something that's really glaringly missing, you can raise that. We're obviously, this is dealing with 2015, so we're going to be reworking this again pretty quick in about 3 months. So if there isn't anything else, what we could probably do is have a motion with the changes that have been discussed, that it be brought to council, I think is appropriate, Selena, for approval, for endorsement. And if council is willing to go there, we can probably even take a couple minutes to cover a couple of these points, unless we want to leave lots of time for the community resource in that business. So just kind of in the hands of council whether they want to get into any of these topics here. So I'm throwing that out right now. Councillor St. James.
I'm happy to do the community resource piece first, and after this, we have any time to circle back around. Put that in.
Does that work for? Yeah, can I just ask the question from
Staff and council. Selena, could we bring this to council tonight? Is that a feasible option? Is the rest of council interested in getting this adopted tonight?
Yes.
I'll tentatively say yes. I'm going to be the one reworking the document. And I do have an appointment in between this meeting and our next meeting, so depending on what time we get out of here, we'll certainly do our best.
Okay, so probably the motion would be to bring the 2015 strategic objective to the next possible council meeting for endorsement by council.
We'll do everything we can to get it back to them.
Okay. So we got a mover, Councillor Valerian, second Councillor White, all in favor? That's carried. Good. Okay, let's get on to the sort of bigger topic, well, not bigger topic, but resource recovery. Do I see Robin in the regional district come in? Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. And Barb from Gibson's Recycling. What's that? Oh, good to see you there. Okay. All right. Good. So, well, this is great. We've got lots of talent in the room. Okay, so I guess, Matt, I'm going to give you the icebreaker part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the staff report accompanies a couple of background documents, including a document prepared over the last few months that tries to combine all the information that's sort of related to this topic, which in the absence of that we really didn't have, had never really developed anything close to that really talks about tonnage and costs and greenhouse gas emissions and so on. And it also provides an update on the regional solid waste plan. Attached to the staff report, there's also some information about Zero Waste Canada, and as Buddy and Barb have informed council in the past, I think earlier in the summer we had a presentation about that, and it's been very topical. Last year, myself, a staff member, and I think Councillor Valeriat at the time has attended a conference in Nanaimo on zero waste. It was an international conference, and so it was very informative. In the essence of the report, keeping in mind that we've got a decision to consider, Council has a decision to consider about the timing and direction of the next Cabras contract. Also, we're suggesting in the report that we take advantage of, in a good sense of the word, of working more closely and more in sync with the regional district in light of their legislative and other abilities. Not to mention the contractors, as many of them are represented in the room, that have a lot to offer on the subject. Because in-house, we don't have designated staff with the capacity to advise council to the extent that it needs to be. So we're suggesting that you might want to seek some advice and some feedback from some form of community engagement, being a committee or a task force or other format. So it's primarily a basis to start a conversation about the direction of solid waste management in Gibsons on the Sunshine Coast, as much as we can influence that. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. So this is my file on solid waste plan for Gibsons. It started in 2009. We still aren't anywhere. Okay. So I'm really hoping that this new council is going to show us the way. Although this is primarily sort of a discussion around council here, at various times I would like to certainly get observations from other members of the public that are here that may be helpful to us with respect to information. So, I guess the question is trying to figure out, what it is we want to do, where we want to go, what the real objectives are. Obviously, waste reduction is a factor, just in terms of where the world is going, but I'm very cognizant as well of the implications for the Seashell landfill, which, based on the information that I've seen from the regional district, could be anywhere from 10 to 15 years. I'd always assumed that once that was done, we were finished with the landfill, but I've since been advised that there's options to extend that facility out there. Robin might be able to talk about that later on. I'm not sure about that, because I know that I believe the District of Powell River barges their garbage to Washington State for incineration. Is not a position I'd like to see us in. So everything's on the table. Really, we'll just start talking and see kind of where it leads. Jeremy, with your past experience, I'm hoping that you're going to be able to lead us.
Thanks, Mayor Rowe. I'm probably a little too close to this topic, but hopefully it doesn't impact my judgment. And so, I mean, I'm going to be honest. This committee is. Let's have honest discussion. Manny compiled some great information, or CAO, sorry. There's a lot of information. There's many different prongs to this. We've got exceptionally good recycling participation, considering that it's a depot model. I mean, a lot of people will say that a depot model doesn't get great recycling rates, and I think that Gibsons Recycling in the town have proven otherwise, which tells me that, in combination with our response to the stage 4 drought, tells me that we have a very conscientious population, and very environmentally conscious. So, reading through this and the zero waste hierarchy and another document that Gibsons Recycling prepared, so many things that we need to do. But to me, the one thread through this is the very, very low-hanging fruit. 42% of our waste stream is organics, is kitchen waste, very little yard waste, which suggests that our drop-off is doing its job there too. Again, all these things that aren't specific to kitchen waste still need tweaking, still need improving, need education. But there's this one very obvious piece of our waste stream that is not only expensive, but it's contributing to greenhouse gas emissions in a pretty significant way. I forget the statistic, but it's a large portion of our corporate emissions. It has the potential to produce oil for local food, which is becoming an issue, and it does free up some landfill space. So, to me, it's glaringly obvious. I mean, and like I said, my bias may be showing, but so this is great. I mean, we've got garbage contract expires in 5.5 months. Robin might want to comment on this, but that's ideally we would say right now, let's get this rolling in 5.5 months and talk about what we do with our garbage collection. I think that's pretty tight. The other complicating factor is that I think it would be beneficial to us to cooperate, actually not just cooperate, but to integrate our procurement with the SCRD, which would be very difficult to do this year. You have to wait till 2017. So I'm not crazy about the idea of yet another 1-year extension, because like the mayor points out, we've been talking about it since 2009. I would say we had a status quo because Gibsons Recycling has continued to increase the number of pieces of recyclables that they take. MMBC is maybe a slightly off tangent topic that we should talk about, but so we made some improvements. This is just a really big one that probably, until we get prices, we don't know for sure, but probably pays for itself. Likelihood is people will participate. I don't think there's a lot of evidence that it discourages people from composting in their backyard, and it does take more waste than just what people will compost in their backyard. So I'd like us I'm suggesting to council that we take a pretty definitive step. There's we received input through consultation, but this is a starting point for consultation. We could go out and say, what would you like? But I have a feeling that, maybe like a couple of other projects we've been grappling with, people might say, why haven't you done this already? So let's say this is what we think we want to do. If we get overwhelming response that we don't want curbside kitchen waste pickup, then we can adapt. But in the meantime, we've got it in our strategic plan. I forget the exact wording, but I'd like to see us to at least indicate that step and indicate whether we're interested in integrating with the SCRD. We get 4 times the buying power, and we get staff who are actually dedicated to work on it. And by the way, we pay taxes to pay for those staff, so it makes sense that they would help us out with it. So they have the expertise in outreach and education and rolling something like this out, which is not a trivial exercise. Getting like the report points out, buying bins, selecting contractors, selecting end use, and then all the education and outreach. So to me, that's what jumps out. But there's a whole lot more in these reports that I'd like to hear from other councillors about.
Okay, so and you're right, there's a whole lot to sort of try to grapple with, so we need to sort of pick the pieces that we can chew on, so to speak. So I think what you're suggesting is that we should very seriously be looking at some form of diversion of organic waste, and probably by some form of curbside pickup. I just want to be clear. Okay. So District of Seychelles got a pilot they've been doing. Robin, do you have any information from that pilot at all, of any specifics from the District of Sechelles organic waste pickup in terms of what sort of success they've had with it or problems?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I know that it did go to their council with specific details around participation levels and tonnage. From what I could gather from the meeting that I attended a few months ago was that the pilot was deemed a success. I know they did go out to tender. Last I checked, they were awaiting council direction as to whether or not to roll out to all of Sechelles or not, but I don't have an update beyond that. So I'm waiting as well to find out what their go forward is.
Okay, so Councillor Bellary, when you talk about procurement in conjunction, say, with the regional district, are you thinking in terms of a region-wide organic pickup? Is that what you're thinking may be the direction?
Yeah, it's thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a very big if, and that the regional district hasn't decided to go in this direction. So we need to find out that, and if they don't, then we'll have a completely different. We'd have a different approach. We'd have our own approach. If we decided to go that way, but yeah, for both garbage and potentially curbside kitchen waste, we have 2,100 households, and the rest of the regional district has about 5,600. To me, that's to go out on our own for that kind of bid doesn't get us the best procurement result, and doesn't take advantage of the economies of scale. It'd be nice to have Sechelles involved too, but that's not up to us, of course.
Councillor Wayne?
I guess, yeah, I hear, especially those last comments by Councillor Valerio especially resonate with me, bringing up the concern that the direction hasn't been established by the regional district yet. There's definitely an opportunity here, and I agree with the opportunity to potentially harmonize the end of the contracts in order to perhaps make a collective RFP. But I think for me, I'm concerned about just looking at the shorter term of the 1 year. I'm especially concerned about banking on something that might happen in a year and then just increasing the level of paper in this folder and being in the same place we are right now, a year from now or 2 years from now. So I would like, when I just go back to the short term and look at the potential for putting out another garbage collection contract for only 1 year, I would really like to see some kind of bold direction steps taken by the town in the short term for that 1 year, and I completely see the potential for what kind of synergies could happen in the regional district a year from now. But I think about initiatives, like there are initiatives in some of these documents that are suggested. Every other week pickup. I mean, I think the town this is a very conscientious community. I think we could get there and accomplish that without a lot of, there'll be some complaints. Some people are used to their weekly pickup, but I think we could get there, especially with the resources we have in Gibsons with the recycling depot and other community assets. We could achieve that in the 1 year before, and it would place us well going into 2017 if we could move to every other week in this 1 year contract. There are other initiatives like transparent bags. I think that could work well with every other week, and I wouldn't propose having bans immediately on certain products that can be recycled, but transparent bags leads in that direction if either the town or the enforcement is something that would need to be worked out. But if the bags are transparent and it can be identified what is in them, it's possible to have bans and change behavior that way to make sure that everyone is conscientiously reducing their waste. So I'm looking at the short term of this upcoming year after the contract. well aware of the fact that there could be potential for a year away, but I'm not really comfortable with having yet another garbage collection contract, weekly status quo, just in the hope that things may come together in a year, because I think your introduction to file was a very effective way to get this conversation going. It's definitely, and I'll just clarify what's going on in the regional district. There is a proposal to change the solid waste management plan, and Robin could probably speak to this more, to prioritize the pickup of organics for 2017 when the rural areas contract comes up. But it's not confirmed yet. Right now it's being proposed that it would essentially come at the expense of resource recovery centers, which would be moved to 2018, having full resource recovery centers in Sechelt, Gibsons, and in Pender Harbour. And that's been, there's been a lot of reluctance about that expressed at the board so far, because there's probably a lot of information in here about the resource recovery centers, and Gibsons and other areas have been quite excited about going in that direction, and people are not keen so far on pushing that back.
Okay, thank you.
I think one comment that I would make there is I don't think there's any question about where the world is going in terms of organic pickup. I mean, Vancouver is pretty much now mandated. You can't put the organics in your regular garbage. So people are definitely getting prepared for that message. I'm not sure that we can move quite as quickly as you're suggesting, Councillor White. I think that to really properly roll that out may require staying with the situation we have for 1 year, but clearly setting in motion for the following year. But I'm just throwing that out in terms of whether it's doable, because it kind of goes back to Councillor Sanjanko's business about public engagement too. There has to be an element of preparation here. Anyway, that's kind of a comment I'm making. Councillor Sanjanko.
So the way that and I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm learning strides. The way that I have explained to a couple of fellow councillors when we talk about this one is I try to keep it straight between waste management and zero waste, waste management and waste reduction, waste management and behavior modification. If what Councillor White is suggesting is that we need to get started immediately on behavior modification, I support that in full. If Councillor Valerian is suggesting that we would be smart, as long as the regional district is going to be moving forward, to try to do procurement with them and get the best prices possible, I agree with that as well, as long as they're going to move forward. So I don't want to put extra pressure on our staff, although I think that there is no time like the present, and someone got a composter for their backyard, big surprise to a lot of people not too long ago, and we started this behavior modification process. And I think I think the community is looking for us to take some steps towards behavior modification and utilizing the facility that we have just up the road. So that's where my expertise is, and so obviously that's what I'm going to comment on. I want to see the right thing done with the contracts, but I don't want to wait another year to start taking steps towards zero waste.
So Councillor Lumley and Councillor Boyer.
Yeah. Thank you. On one hand, I can understand the boat contracts and the regionalization and the lower costs and so on and so forth, but I think it kind of almost flies in the face of our strategic plan, which says targeting zero waste and creating. You'll notice in our strategic plan, I know it hasn't been adopted yet, so, but it also says creating local jobs. And part of me thinks that actually having a plan or creating this plan for zero waste might not be a regional plan. It may be a community plan. It maybe could be like a neighborhood plan. Like, you know, you could go back so small and then you could build outwards. But it might be like a completely community thing where there are local jobs. And it could be the same in Seychelles, it could be the same somewhere else, but like with the resource recovery. You know, I'm doing the same thing in my business at this time, and it's interesting. Like if you look at it, then you will have no garbage, you know, with the organics and the recycling, and then people's behavior modifications. They'll start shopping differently. And I know there's lots of people. Look at all the people in town that complained about the water restrictions because they're growing their own vegetables. This isn't a regional thing. These are just individual things. And I think part of our strategic plan and how you want your community to operate is just that, like people taking responsibility for their community. You know, so that's, I think what I'm saying is I kind of agree with the idea of like, I think we should start like, you know, researching how we can do that instead of just falling into this like major garbage pickup contracts. That's just my personal feeling. So, and there's probably lots of ways to do it. There might be some people that have no garbage pickup, you know, believe it or not. And what about these people? Should there be tax incentives? Should there be rebates? Like, what if someone does buy a composter? Maybe we should be, you know, helping this educate and helping people get into this stream of thinking, right? So, anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, so I'll go back to Councillor Valeria, but again, you raise what this is like those Russian dolls, right? You take one off, and there's another one, and then there's another one, and another one, and so your comment about it's almost the pay-as-you-throw comment, like, okay, if I only put my garbage out once a month, should I be paying the same tax bill or garbage bill that somebody else is when you do it once a month or every day or every week?
I think that's, if you really want to change or create or be leaders in change, I think then you just have to get to that last doll, and you know, it's going to happen. It's the way of the world. It's like there's nothing we can do. It's just, this is how we have to operate. And if you want your community to get there, I think, you know, we could take steps to get there.
Let's go with the Russian doll analogy. And I appreciate what Councilor Huntley's saying about local solutions, even neighborhood scale. I mean, certainly household scale. The way I see it, the regional solid waste plan is the outer couple of shells of that, and it's the big things that everybody should be doing. I mean, household recycling, green waste instead of burning it in the backyard. And then I absolutely agree that local solutions kind of come in and fill. Okay, well, I was going to say fill the gaps, but let's say, you know, the smaller dolls are local, very specific solutions. For example, we have electronics recycling here in Gibsons, thanks to Gibsons Recycling, that doesn't exist elsewhere on the coast. So, you know, we've got a local solution in that. That's a huge waste stream that adds a lot of toxic, or potentially adds a lot of toxic elements to landfill. But I think there's some stuff that's just not local. I mean, some things are fairly universal, broad elements of waste management or zero waste. And so those are the ones that we haven't targeted yet, and we see Metro Vancouver targeting those. They have had some difficulties with their rollout of an organics ban. It's a tricky one to spot, but there's a lot to be learned. Luckily, we're not pioneering that, or it would be. I think it would take all our staff all their time. So, I'm just an engineer. I'm not an expert in behavior modification, and I'm going to ask staff in a second. But my understanding is that people are more, no matter how conscientious they are, people are more likely to respond to a carrot than a stick. And as much as I'd like to charge forward in March 1st, say we're making some big changes, what I know of other public rollout programs is, there's an ad in the paper yesterday saying things are going to change very drastically in 6 months, get ready. And every week there's things are going to change, you need to be ready. We could, I'll ask staff, we could start that tomorrow. But the way I see going to every other week without other options is just all stick. And maybe the regional district or private enterprise can fill in with some carrots, but I mean, it might reduce the utility bill a little bit, but I don't know if that's enough of a carrot. So maybe I'm gonna ask town staff first, and I mean, if you want to defer to regional district staff, but what do you see as the response from the community in terms of staff time to going to bi-weekly without offering any other options on March 1st?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I almost I'm trying to sort of separate what's councils that are under the purview of council to actually make a decision on bans. I'm not sure we have the authority to make a ban or anything. We cannot necessarily go at it alone from, as I mentioned earlier, from a capacity perspective, and also the fact that people already pay for a service that's available through the regional district. So what would they want to be paying twice for that? Issues like clear plastics or bans or every other week, to me, those are details that follow. There's decisions that need to be made ahead of that. If we haven't decided yet that we want to capture the waste that we presently send in the form of kitchen waste, that decision, every other week is just a consequence of fine-tuning a program that needs to be integrated with recyclables and solid waste pickup. It can't exist on its own. The goal of zero waste for that person that would be ideal, and it's what we should all be aiming for. The reality is there's still some time away, except for the really extreme hardcore. But even for those folks, there's still the cost of maintaining a landfill and meeting obligations and the permits that the region has to operate a landfill. So trying to break down from a decision perspective, I think one of the first pieces from staff perspective is, does council want to address the need to, or the opportunity to recover 40% of what we currently send to the landfill by introducing an organics program? Who's going to do that? We very quickly realized that we personally don't have the staff, never had, but we can contract that out, or we can work with the regional district to do that. I think the education, irrespective of any changes we make in the short and long term, will require education and engagement with the community. But perhaps what I heard from Councilor Valeri is that we might want to sort of skip the step of asking people whether they want to recover their compost or not. All the programs that have been released have had a tremendous amount of success, including 10 years ago, the Lady Smith program, which, as far as I know, is still running relatively well. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel and ask people that all over again.
What about, sorry, Councilor, I'll come right back to you and just say, what about the strata complexes and things like this? How does that fit into, because we're kind of talking about sort of residential pickup, right? Right now, their garbage is picked up by independent contractors. It's not part of the towns. Am I correct?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So the strata complexes pay for their own garbage pickup, right?
Yeah, correct.
So we would be just talking about organics in terms of pretty much single-family dwelling. Wherever we normally pick up garbage, which is some townhouse complexes, we do pick up garbage because the units are sort of separate and that, but the apartment complexes we don't. and commercial is on their own as well. Okay. Yeah, okay. Is there any input from back there from Aaron at all about organics? Anything you'd like to say to us about your experience? And you don't have to, I'm just giving you the opportunity if there's anything you feel would add to the discussion here.
No, I was just on the, I think you were asking Robin about the success rate on the District of Seashell
Yes.
pilot. Well, we found we did a report to the district, and it was very successful. We had a 98% participation rate, and we found that a lot of the elderly people liked it because we did take the lawn clippings and things like that in at the curb. So it was good for them. They found it. When we first were handing out the bins, we had about a third of the 500 homes that were not really interested in it. They said they weren't, this is not going to work. I don't need the bin. By the time we actually audited the pilot, it was a lot of those people that turned really enjoyed the services that were provided. So yeah, they were quite happy with it.
What about the actual throwaway? Was there a lot of difficulty in making sure the right stuff was in there, I guess, or not the wrong stuff?
Well, we check it. The Graco checks every bin when it comes at the curb. So as they're tipping, they found that we were looking at maybe the district wanted to go to an automated truck that just picked up the bin and dumped. But we found that you physically have to check each bin as you're at the curb, so you can physically see what's in each bin. So we found that by that, we didn't have hardly any contamination. We got nothing but food scraps and yard and garden.
Robin, did you have any further comments?
Sure, just to add or sort of let you know sort of where the SCRD is at is that in 2016 the SCRD has to go to RFP for curbside services. So the existing garbage collection contract expires at the end, so February 28th, 2017. So then I'll say the word, a new contract has to be in place to start March 1st, 2017. So working backwards, we need to go to tender in 2016. So the board will be making hopefully a decision, maybe November ISC. I'm not sure how long it will take, but they will be presented through ISC and through the budget process. Opportunities to include curbside organics, looking at every other week. So basically developing what the terms will be for that RFP. So it has not yet been decided as to what that RFP will look like, but there is board desire to not continue with the existing service. I mean, we're not just going to do standard garbage every week through to whatever that next term would be, because I mean you're looking at 2020 at that point. So what that's going to look like, we don't know yet, but the board will be evaluating that over the next couple of months.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Wiggin, I sort of left it.
Oh, I think I saw this was different.
Oh, yeah, Brian.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a couple of questions? As a guy who's had a drawer composter for 4 or 5 years now, I put out my garbage can every 6 months, full of dog hair. Reference Councillor Valeria's stats of 2,300 households in Gibsons and 5,300, I think, on the coast. And pertinent to, I'd like to think, pertinent to your 1-year discussion, a 1-year contract discussion. And given the precedent that I believe the Director of Engineering has been granted sole source contracting on certain subjects, and given the existence of the GRD expertise in the town, and Councillor Lumley's point about local jobs, could we not consider, sorry, could you not consider a sole source 1-year contract on a model created by the recognized expert in the town of Gibsons? And tied in with this is, if we piggyback with or integrate with the SCRD, where do the 7,000 households organics go? The 2,300 households in Gibsons may be within the capacity of GRD's composter at the site. And you tie that in with, I leave the method of pickup or drop-off up to the plan's creator for your approval with staff vetting, but small scale may be the easier managed model upon which to base future expansion as a kickoff, especially since you've got a 1-year contract renewal term to deal with. So those are just off the top of my head thoughts to add to your conversations.
Barb, do you want to put in 2 cents at this point?
I would also like to point out that I believe that there is another compost facility that's South Coast, so there are opportunities even if GRD isn't up to scale, but certainly the model that we have can be scaled up to whatever, and we've often presented different technologies that could be used in communities, strata, neighborhoods, right? Green Mountain technology, right, has the Earth Cube. I think Buddy sent that information to Manny. So certainly there are options that are small scale, and there's options that are large scale. And one of the things I want to point out about procurement is that sometimes you create monopolies on the coast, so you annihilate other businesses that are in your local community, and there becomes, the only game in town is one garbage contractor or one compost facility, and this doesn't necessarily create a healthy community for jobs. So I think that with zero waste, you have to look at the big picture. And if you look at the hierarchy that we gave you, this is an international document. And in fact, 3 years ago, I sat in the chamber at Oakland. The mayor very graciously lent us the chamber to be working on this document. And I was working on this international update of the zero waste hierarchy with people from India, Italy, all over the world. So the document that we gave you isn't a Buddy and Barb document. This is a document that has been created by zero waste experts worldwide and agreed upon. So I urge you to really look at that, because it is about local. It is about looking first. For example, best practices is first you look at, can you reduce your organic waste? Can you do it in your backyard, right? And then you look at, do you have to transport it to a facility? So you're going up the chain. So, you know, think about those solutions, and think about also that only 1/5 of organic waste is unavoidable waste. 4/5 is, with education, could be reduced. This is people just wasting food that could be eaten. So you've got things like food rescue programs that could reduce this waste, education. And if you reduce your waste, because you're paying dump fees, right, for organic waste. If you reduce this even by a few percentages, your bill will go down, the cost that you're having to do for these programs. So it's important to think about the community engagement and changing behaviors, because if you don't, you're going to have an increasing cost of managing these materials in your community. And I've got the, costs from a garbage contract, right? From 2009 to 2012 here that I pulled out of my email, and every year it's escalating, right? And the amounts are escalating. So to get a handle on it is behavior change.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. There's that kind of a, I was going to say two-step, but there's probably more than steps. I think the step we're looking at the present time is, what do we do initially about organics?
Yeah.
Once that gets resolved, ultimately there's the modification that's been talked about by yourself, by Councillor Sanjanko and Councillor White, in terms of continuing to reduce that organic waste over time. Actually, I guess Councillor White was going.
Are you sure? I just had a quick comment and a question, or a clarification from Brian, actually, so I make sure I'm following the bouncing ball. I wanted to echo what Barb has said, and thank you for saying that, Barb, because I didn't so eloquently try to say it earlier. If we're not careful and don't do the behavior modification first, all we're going to do is take organics out of our garbage and have too much organics. Like, Ben is constantly after me if I make a salad and I have way too much lettuce that I don't use. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So I'm trying to be really, with myself, mindful, like, is it brown and should I eat it? Or am I just being silly? Like, I know it sounds like I'm drilling down too far, but I'm just saying, if you don't do the behavior modification carefully first, you're just going to end up with a problem that looks a different color, that's all. And Brian, I just wanted, for my own understanding, what you were suggesting is between now and March 16th to give some thought, so that when a new potential contract went for a year between March 16th and February 28, 2017, potentially during that time of the new contract, you were suggesting that a 1 year step towards zero waste, or a 1 year pilot or plan be carried out locally. Can you just maybe clarify that for me? Because I was in my own mind going, it's September 15th now, and we have until March 2016 to get ready to do something, and I just wanted to make sure I understood what that something was.
Thank you. I hope I didn't come across as suggesting it as a pilot, because that's your business. I was just trying to expand the conversation, given some of the questions and statements made by all of you. And I was thinking out of the box, that's all. Also, your business about the education, I found myself, I didn't know about it until I started using the composter. And it was a process of education through usage and revelation over time. So, but I do agree that there's the carrot and stick argument. And you may also want to think about, if you go to every other week garbage pickup, whether that's done at the same rate that is currently charged for every week. For example, I think I pay $133 or something a year. And after 4 years, after 3 years, that would have bought my composter. And I could have taken the 1 can every 6 months upstairs. But it's just an example of a carrot and stick. Anyway, I hope I answered your question.
Been waiting patiently, Councillor White.
Yeah, there's a lot to respond to, what to say. Got notes all over the place. I guess I've heard a couple different approaches here, and I'm may have heard wrong, but Councillor Sanjenko just suggested that the behavior change should come first, and I fully agree with that. I think maybe I heard earlier that the organics, curbside organics pickup should come first, and then we can go to initiatives for behavior change, and I'm concerned about that. I guess, yeah, I guess the carrots and sticks must fit in there somewhere too, about maybe offering people carrots. I guess the organics pickup would be a big carrot, but then why would anyone have any incentive to change their behavior, especially around home composting, for example? That's my big concern. I think that behavior change should come first, and we should be looking at initiatives to encourage that. And I think we have been moving in that direction for years. I don't think it's a matter of putting out an ad in the paper next week. I've lived in Gibsons for about 10 years, and I think the material's probably in this folder. But I've read in the newspaper about the contract coming to the town, or even attended meetings, and I've heard councils say, or individuals say, okay, we'll have another 3 years or 2 years or whatever, a contract of garbage collection, but this is the last time. Next time we're going to change. Next time we'll do things differently and encourage, find some way to encourage recycling and zero waste. And I've seen it at least 2 times in Gibsons. I was there in person at the SCRD earlier this term when the contracts came up at the SCRD, and similar comments were made, and I think it wasn't even a unanimous motion to renew the contract for 2 more years, because people do want change, and they've seen over and over again we're in this cycle of saying, okay, well, next time we'll put forward some kind, I really think the first natural step still is going to every other week. I've heard that things are going to change for years, and I think a lot of people like Mr. Sadler have heard that as well and have changed their behavior, and there are many more in the town who engage in home composting, and many more who could. So that's my response to to the discussion so far. I also wonder about, education is huge in what we could accomplish in the short term in the next year, and if we want to encourage the behavior change, I think we need to look at education initiatives. We, as Councillor Valerius pointed out, we do send residents of Gibsons are taxed for waste management, and part of that is education. So we'd have to work closely with the SCRD on that. And I wonder more about, it's been, the strata developments have come up. I wonder about businesses, complexes like Christensen Village, which I understand everything just gets sent to the landfill from there. What kind of pilot projects we could initiate in some of those are places where composting is impossible. So, I wonder what kind of pilot projects we could initiate there that could make use of some of the resources we have in our town already. But that's kind of a question, and we obviously have a lot of leverage over our homes, residences in the town through the garbage collection contract, but for these other entities that have private arrangements, I don't know how we could change behavior there. I'm curious about that.
Manny, do you have some comments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, more specifically on the last question from Councillor White, I wouldn't be the staff to advise on how to best change behavior in multifamily or residential. Councillor Sanjenko, or some members of council suggested sort of behavior change should come before any changes to contracts. The reality is, within 5.5 months, we no longer have a contract, and I think people are still expecting their garbage picked up, whether we like it or not. So perhaps we can meet in the middle and agree that behavior change needs to happen as part of the solution, but on its own, it's not sufficient. And certainly, I think the best program in the world might not do the trick to change people's minds that they no longer need garbage pickup in 5.5 months. So there's that immediate decision, and certainly whether it's all direct award, or is a continuation negotiated, or is there a separate individual contract with or without organics pickup, which would be a challenge to do with the latter. I think it's going to take a combination. I keep going back to the decision that are more immediate for us, which is what are we going to do between now and February to what exactly we're going to be advertising, if anything.
Councilor Lorraine. So I accept our CAO's kind of focus on the priorities, so maybe we can get back to that. Just a couple of comments on what to wrap up, and at least to kind of circle in on what we've been talking about. And this gets into my view of the world a little bit, but there's a certain segment of the population that will simply do the right thing and fill the organics bin because it's the right thing to do. But I have to say, my impression is that there's a whole other segment that will do it because it saves money. So food waste is a waste of money, and as food gets more expensive, as we start to put a price on carbon, people won't waste food. I mean, yes, there's a whole bunch of education with the organics bin. It could be a whole sheet on how to avoid food waste, and I would absolutely agree. It's not just here's how you use your green bin, but here are all the other steps you can take. And the same thing comes down to local solutions. The ideal solution is you put it in a backyard composter, because you only had to walk out to your backyard. There's no trucks involved. There's no carbon emissions. There's no highway use. Some of these things are not, they're not always scalable. So, like local solutions are ideal, but some things are industrial processes that need to happen at a certain distance. I mean, a lot of people think Seashelf's a long way, but in the Canadian context, it's not that far. We go out to competitive bid, and in time, that transport will actually disqualify businesses that are too far away. And I mean, we have an ability through an RFP to massage some of the subjective options. I mean, the cheapest option might be shipping it to a Washington state landfill, or God forbid, the cheapest option might be burning it in an incinerator. But we would probably say there's a limit to how low we want to go. But I just don't know that we can do everything locally. I mean, we have to encourage households to keep it within their house, and then the next closest option is hopefully in the town. But let's face it, I mean, we're talking local jobs. I consider Sunshine Coast jobs to be local jobs. So we're talking about regional cooperation, and we're talking about looking at a regional context. So anyway, going back to what CAO is saying, we need to give a direction. I'm not terribly happy about saying 1 more year, and that's why I feel like I'd like to add some text that says this is where we would like to go, barring any major upheaval. And that way it is, we're kind of we're getting a starting point, and we're asking our residents what they think. This is what we're planning to do, and so maybe we can talk about inserting something as well as just the year extension. From my point of view, I mean, I'd love to do a direct award. It wouldn't be me doing it, but I don't think that's fair to taxpayers unless Maybe there's something that can be worked out, but I just feel like competitive procurement is the only way to make sure that we can turn to our residents and say you're not overpaying, and that's, from my point of view, that's how the marketplace works. But I'm gonna leave it at that while we talk about these two recommendations that are on the agenda.
Councillor White?
Well, seeing that I think we've discussed most of what we can at this point, and to focus on the recommendations, I would like to support, I very reluctantly, though support another request for proposals, but I think we do need to combine it with behavior change in some way, as the CAO suggested, to meet halfway. And as I've said previously, I think the logical way to do that is to make this garbage collection contract for every other week. I think people in Gibsons are ready for it, and those who aren't can make those adjustments. I think we have the resources available here and right up and down the Sunshine Coast for people to be able to find, to adjust to every other week collection. So I'm willing to put forward this recommendation with the amendment of every other week in order to address this behavior change element that we've been talking about here. And there are other initiatives that we could get into later, as the mayor's mentioned.
So I have to say, although I appreciate the intent of what you're suggesting here, I would be very concerned about taking that step when we're not providing any alternatives to people. I really think we're going to have a pretty strong reaction if we suddenly go to every other week garbage collection and 4 months and there's no other alternatives provided. That would be my concern. Councillor Sandiago.
I'm going to provide what might be a suggestion that gets us to close to the same place, perhaps, is would council consider adding something that indicated that for the same period of time, March 16 to February 28, 2017, that we would also be putting out a request for proposals or for interest to work with a contractor for that same 1 year period of time, where we would, knowing that we're waiting for contracts to line up and to see what the SCRD is going to do, have a 1 year kind of grace period where we're starting to work on some behavioral change modification with a contractor. And also, I don't know if that's starting to take some steps with composting, so that we really know what our community is ready for by the time the SCRD contract all comes up for renewal, and we've done some work to start to shift, giving people carrots and starting to shift some behavior. We've got a year to do it, more than a year, but perhaps it's not going immediately to every other week garbage pickup, but we're working with someone to start to do that. And perhaps that's part of what the select committee's role is, to kind of be a liaison with that contractor.
Councillor Lumley?
I'm going to ask what everyone else is going to ask if you go to every other week, which I kind of like, but do they pay less tax?
Or fees?
Oh yeah, fees. Like is each individual?
Well, I think the problem with that is that if things lined up perfectly and you were doing garbage pickup 1 week and organics the other week, your fees aren't going to change. If anything, they may be more, for all I know, because there's still going to be weekly pickup. It's just for this 12-month period where if one went to every other week, that there would be nothing in between. And certainly that would be a question that you would get from residents is, okay, so you've cut our garbage pickup in half, you haven't given us any other options, and you're still charging us the same.
Thank you. And then the other thing is that I also, I'm inclined to think that it's gonna be tough to go back for people as well. So even if, maybe if that's what Charlene's saying, is that take this year to kind of even mix in with her public engagement theory, that we could add this into it, like how, you know, where are people in the community willing to go? Instead of us, you know, making up their minds, I guess, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think it'd be hard if you start picking up organics up the road, it'd be hard to turn people back.
Councillor White and Councillor Miller.
I guess I just don't, I don't see it the same way of whether there are any other options or not. I think that what we heard from the gallery from Mr. Sadler is very ample proof that there are plenty of other options to filling out a can of garbage every other week. It's quite possible to get your waste down to every 6 months. I mean, that's the record that I've heard so far. I didn't realize that that anyone had reached that point.
The record is former Councillor Curry.
Curry,
once a year.
It was once a year. Yeah, yeah. So I think there are plenty of other options to putting your garbage out every week. That's the way I look at it, and I understand that Mr. Mayor, you're talking about, I guess, government-initiated programs, but that's my view.
Barb, did you want to throw something in for that?
What if you, for the March to February, you had, Gibsons is going to do a zero waste challenge, and we are going to try to shrink the amount in our bins, right? And really did a social marketing, right, about the impact our community can have, right? And have sort of a monthly thing, a neighborhood challenge, perhaps, and then at the end of that year, look at, you know, the volume, the weights in the cans, right? You've done a waste audit of Gower Point, and what was the other segment here in Gibsons? It was Upper Gibsons.
Yeah, based on collection.
Upper Gibsons.
So upper and lower.
So you could start with those areas that had the waste audit and go, even writing a letter, right, to those households and saying, hey, look, this is what was in your garbage can, and now we're challenging, right?
Right, thank you.
Use that.
Okay, so you're on the third or fourth Russian doll.
Okay, okay.
But I think where the council is going is they're really talking about going in a fairly substantial change of direction. Is a question of what steps we're taking to get there, and how we signal that to the community, and how we make sure that we have heard in case there are issues that we are not contemplating as we have this discussion. Would you, Councillor Miller?
Just quickly to say, I think, that's a brilliant idea. That's exactly the kind of attention it needs. But I'm of the opinion that I don't see action unless there's some kind of urgency. And to say we're going to do the zero waste challenge because you are practicing for February 2017 when you're only going to get every other week garbage pickup and we're all in this together is probably the right way to sequencing. My fear is that you have a huge backfire and you set yourself back 5 years by saying you should be able to do better, and we're only going to provide the service assuming that you can do better. So I'm leery of waiting all the time only to have it blow up in our faces by taking some unilateral action. We're talking about contracting, outreach, and education. We haven't had the discussion with the regional district, and I really don't want to put Robin on the spot, but I mean, maybe you could answer the question, should we be spending money on a contractor to get this social marketing, get this outreach, or is this something that's within the capacity of regional district staff? I mean, if you're doing it for the electoral areas, then it's tacking the town on is probably not a huge issue, but if you were asked by the town to basically get an outreach campaign going, is that something that is possible, or do we need to resolve to get a contractor involved? If you, Robin, if you can answer.
Yeah, there's a couple different, I think, things going on definitely at play here. If, so let's say the SRD decides that the RFP will look like curbside organics with every other week, with some type of a pay-as-you-throw option, because that's what's in the solid waste management plan. So the direction is there, it's just getting that endorsement. Through the procurement, I mean, we definitely want to do that as quickly as possible, so we know obviously budget implications, the launch date. It would have an incredibly large outreach and education component, which would definitely include reducing your food waste to begin with, reducing your garbage, where are your recycling options? So it would be all encompassing. So it would depend on, I guess, how that collaboration would be with the town of Gibsons, absolutely. It's gonna end up benefiting everybody on the coast, regardless of what service that you or don't have, because something like Love Food, Hate Waste, the outreach is there, it's just a matter of fitting it into whatever promotions that we're gonna be doing alongside with some type of a rollout. Again, it's a little premature for me to say that because I don't know what the board is going to decide, but absolutely reducing waste, education, outreach, engagement is integral in having success in the rollout of a program and follow-up. And are you inspecting the bins? Are you tagging the bins? There's lots of examples out there from other areas of, you know, lessons learned, best practices, what not to do. But also really important, and I'm putting that out there for your council and also it'll be for the SCRD board, is around that education and outreach engagement piece, but what's the vision? What actions do you want the residents to take? And then you, once that decision is made, then you build backwards as to what is it that you're asking them to do? So are you asking them to put everything into a backyard composter? Are you asking them to put it into a bin along with the reduction needs? So those actions need to be decided, and then you would build your programming engagement and everything around it.
Thank you. So, Councillor Sanjanko.
It wasn't my intention to figure out who the contractor would be today. I just simply wanted to say perhaps if the right decision is not to go to every other week garbage, could we work something in that said, that's our intention, you know, after this 1-year contract, but in the meantime, we want to initiate a behavior modification challenge for our community. Is there a way to keep it a bit general and let some of these ducks come in a row to see exactly how that would happen? And I'll add to that, sometimes local government isn't the best motivator for community change. Sometimes it takes community motivation from the community to make change.
Sorry, Maddie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to reiterate, just for the purpose of clarifying staff's motion, the second motion there, we're fully aware that substantial changes need to occur in order for us to get to a zero waste, including every other week and education and all that. And that's in sort of bureaucratic speak. That's what we mean by to allow sufficient time to consider the changes to the current provision, is that it has to be done sort of in an integrated form. Who does that and how it goes about, whether it involves the community, whether it's an advisory or not. I think that's somewhat of a separate question. So I know it's not entirely clear, but we assume there would be substantial changes and there would be required time. So I'm kind of going around in circles, but the most immediate piece is the contract as we spoke before, and it doesn't preclude, in fact it could start today, considerations for every other week, which I honestly don't see how we can just go from every 2 weeks, 70 to a 90 liter can, to we're only coming every other week. In the absence of sort of a program to support that.
So I'm wondering, Councillor Valeria did sort of send an email out to members of council the other day, suggesting sort of some addition to that motion. And it specifically was to signal the intention to reduce to bi-weekly. And the wording that Councillor Blair had put out in his email would be a continuation, I guess, of this second recommendation, would be that, and that subject to the results of consultation. Now, you've said completed by March 2016, I'm not sure about that, but subject to results of consultation completed by March 2016, the town begin to plan for residential solid waste service changes to add curbside organics pickup and reduce garbage pickup frequency to bi-weekly in 2017. So that would be signaling to the community the direction that council is looking at going. It might not have full support in the sense that it refers specifically to curbside organics pickup, and Councillor White, I'm not sure if you're there or not based on what you were talking about earlier. But something massaging that a bit along those lines, I think one gets us to the issue of dealing with this next contract for 1 year, but also makes it very clear that there is now going to be a change in direction that's going to be forthcoming within the next 14, 15 months, I guess. Anyway, I'm just throwing this out for to see whether or not I'm capturing the intent here, Councillor Blair, and that was sort of your recommendation.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. I was waiting for the right time. I mean, I know we don't need to be fully parliamentary, but Councillor White had maybe started towards a motion that went to every other week. Is that still, I mean, Councillor White, you still see that as on the table? Do you want your...
Seconded.
Okay. So so then, yeah, I wanted to put a deadline on the consultation because we could end up a year from now and there's no decisions been made. I'm open to the language, of course, and the consultation hasn't been discussed. It some of these things that we're talking about how to plan the behavior change, how to do the outreach. That's exactly the kind of concrete thing that a committee could chew on, and make recommendations. I mean, there's all sorts of great ideas out there on how to make this public, whether we want it to be town select committee. I mean, I do note that the regional district has an advisory committee. I don't know if it's fully regional, so maybe it's not the right place. Maybe Brian could comment on that as the chair. But it's the kind of thing that a committee could get right down to business instead of big scale. What do we want to do? I mean, there's let's say let's have some input on how we're going to do this. Maybe we don't need a communications consultant to tell us how to do it. Maybe we can get a group of residents together to do that. But in any case, and I'll make that motion, the one that you just read out. How does the committee feel about kind of putting a deadline on the consultation part of it so that we can make a decision a full year out and get this implemented, in the right way?
I would agree with that without specifically saying curbside. I probably just, we have to make some decisions on how to deal with organics in the solid waste system without specifically saying it's going to be curbside. There might be other alternatives, either now or later, that we haven't chewed on yet.
So would Councillor Blair, because it sort of was coming from you, I just want to sort of check in and say, what if it was changed to read, the town begin to plan for residential solid waste service changes for alternative organic diversion and reduce garbage pickup. I guess that's leaving it open to the, whatever this committee might come forward with ideas. It may be that there isn't another option, but I don't know. Does that change too much the substance of what you're wanting to put forward?
I'm not sure. I actually was hoping to change it to kitchen waste just because I think we've dealt with our yard waste organic, so if we specify kitchen or food waste. As far as whether it's curbside, I mean, maybe it's not for us to decide right now. I honestly believe there's a huge ick factor that prevents people from carting a sloppy bunch of kitchen waste up to a location, and there's other odor considerations at that particular location. But let's have the discussion. But let's at least signal that we intend to recycle more compost kitchen waste, and that sending it to landfill is not going to be an acceptable status quo. So I mean, I don't see a lot of options, but maybe we can hash that out in the next 6 months, whether it's curbside or not.
Could I suggest alternative food waste diversion solutions as the change to wording?
Yeah.
I think everything else is fine.
So, here's what I think this motion would say. Correct me if I'm wrong. It would be what you see as your second item there on the staff report. So that'd be recommended council that a request for proposals be issued for a 1-year period from March 2016, February 28, 2017 for the garbage collection contract to allow sufficient time to consider changes to the current provision of solid waste management services in Gibsons, and that subject to the results of consultation completed by I'll say March 31, 2016, the town begin to plan for residential solid waste service changes to, give me that wording, to include?
To include alternative food waste diversion solutions.
Okay.
Kitchen. No, food, kitchen, I mean,
Okay.
changing it from there.
And reduce garbage pickup frequency to bi-weekly in 2017. So clearly signals the change is coming, and what has to be determined is how we're going to deal with the kitchen waste. I mean, is that comfortable for members of the council?
I'll move that.
Councilor Wellman will move that. Okay, let's get a second. Okay, Councilor Larry. Some further discussion on that. Councilor
Where
Webb.
does the select committee fit in there? Is that,
That's
the
a
consultation?
Okay, so that's a separate motion. I'm just trying to deal with the one. Okay? So no further discussion then, all in favor on that? Okay?
Support putting it forward to council.
Okay, good. So then the second, the third recommendation there is recommended to council that consideration be given to establishing a select committee to provide recommendations on any proposed changes to the provision of waste management services in Gibsons. Councilor Sanjanko?
So the only thing I feel that's missing from that is anything to do with community engagement or behavior modification. So basically this select committee is just going to be set up to provide recommendations on any proposed changes to the provision of waste management services in Gibsons. Not how our community is going to get ready in the next year to actually reduce our waste and be ready for what we just described in the paragraph above.
Okay, Councilor Webb?
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable with having simpler language. I think it's pretty much straight from, I think our strategic plan talks directly addresses zero waste. So I'd rather see something that just says on achieving zero waste in Gibsons, which could bring in education and those other elements as well. And I'm also concerned about when we're talking about a mandate that's to propose changes to the provision of waste management services. It sounds like it's more of an overlap of PMAC at the SCRD, because it's that committee, as Councillor Valeria's already mentioned, does look at changes that come from the SCRD anyway, and that's where changes would probably come from when we're talking about waste management services. I think we could look more broadly at achieving zero waste in Gibsons, and it would take in what Councillor Sanjay was bringing up.
Councilor Sanjay?
Or even take, if that's not comfortable, or even taking steps towards zero waste in Gibsons.
May come back to staff there. I'm not hung up on the wording. I think the question, what you're just trying to get to, is to have some members of the community assisting us with sort of basically how we're going to move, take some steps towards the sort of zero waste objective.
Manny?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, one piece that is missing here, which I would suggest sort of captures some of the, whether it's zero waste or what exactly is this committee going to do, is the terms of the committee. And so I would envision us bringing back a staff report that lays out, the type of committee and invitation, and that would be the opportunity to define, what do we need from an advice perspective. And just because I don't think this could all be done in one motion as we have here. It wasn't the assumption that we would be bringing back a report on a bit more detail on how the committee could work.
I agree, Manny. I think all I was trying to do is, again, just like we did with the above one, signal to the community that it is a little bit more than what the wording there currently says. That's all I was trying to do.
Councilor White.
The strategic plan says targeting zero waste with a focus on reusing materials and creating local jobs. So I think just simply saying targeting zero waste would align with our strategic plan that we haven't formally, our draft strategic plan.
Oh, that one.
So that might be the easiest way to do it.
So how would that read then in your view?
On targeting zero waste, recommendations on targeting zero waste in Gibsons.
Sorry, is that an addition to here, you mean?
Provide recommendations on targeting zero waste in Gibsons. So you want
Mr. Mayor, corporate officer and I were just having a suggestion to you would consider an amendment to our own motion as well.
Thank you.
hasn't been put forward yet.
No, we're just trying to massage the motion.
It's if we massage the motion, if I could use your word, Mr. Mayor, a little bit, is to reflect the zero waste component, as in the strategic plan, and also. Sonia, can you run that by me again?
Yeah, so if you changed it to that staff be directed to draft terms of reference for council's consideration to establishing a select committee to provide recommendations on targeting zero waste in Gibsons.
That says a lot more.
You want to just read that again?
So the entire recommendation would be replaced with that staff draft terms of reference for council's consideration to establishing a select committee to provide recommendations on targeting zero waste in Gibsons. So basically, staff would be bringing back a terms of reference for this committee with their purpose, their scope, outlining or hoping to achieve what's in this recommendation, and council could at that time adopt it or amend it or do as you wish.
Comfortable? Councilor Valero?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I'm just going to make a point now that that is so broad that it means the terms of reference are really important. So, I mean, it can probably be adaptable, but yeah, I guess as long as there's just some very specific, deliverables or targets that, on a timeline that this committee is going to reach, we don't get bogged down to the point, where we haven't made any progress, or even worse, that council has to make a decision without getting any concrete recommendations from the committee. So I'm perfectly comfortable leaving it in staff's hands. I'm concerned that we don't have any real targets, and this zero waste as you said, is multifaceted target to say the least. So anyway, I think I'm gonna leave it with let's wait and have a look at what these draft terms of reference look like.
Okay, so that's moved by Councilor Sanjanko. Second, Councilor White. All in favor of that? Okay, that's carried. Okay, that's our discussion on
Resource recovery. Any partners before we move on? Thanks for coming, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got one more item, which is a discussion on affordable housing that Councillor Lumley had raised for discussion. And, just going back to your wanting to sort of have some movement, I think, or some discussion on that topic generally.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a liaison, I would like to move forward with our affordable housing policy, changing it obviously. And I referenced in my email about the community amenity, the guide for community amenity contributions that was put out by the province in March of 2014. And if you read that and compare it against our current working policy, it's ours is kind of flies in the face of it. I know ours is outdated. So my first, I guess, seeing that there's already comments, or there's already it's in our smart plan section 9.4 about providing minimum and maximum density allowances. I'd like to move forward with changing the zoning bylaw to agree with to the OCP, so that then we can move forward with our affordable housing policy. That's basically what I mean, there's a huge amount of work to be involved, right? Working with developers. I know there's the community land trust that Matt's working on, and you all know Matt Thompson. He's coordinator for the Sunshine Coast Housing Committee. I met with him and Silas, as he's the alternative for the housing, and we had a pretty good discussion. And I know they're moving forward with the community land trust, and they're working with like a local developer to do smart homes. And I also spoke to the chief administrator about some things. And I think the most important thing is that when we redo the policy, like right now, it's called like a lift, which ours contains, which is triggered by the market. And the province really wants communities to get out of that. It should be based on cost, and if we can work towards that. But obviously, we have to redo the zoning bylaw first. So that's why I put this forward for discussion.
Okay, so there was a specific affordable housing policy, and we don't actually have an amenity policy per se, do we? That's sort of wrapped in there. I want to make sure we're talking the same things here. Manny,
Certainly, our policy is as amenities in affordable housing as part of the same.
Okay.
There's another differentiation that I perhaps need to clarify, or ask for some clarification, including perhaps if you allow Andre to make a couple comments. The difference between updating our policy and doing the zoning work on density that is listed in the official community plan policies 9.4. Andre, those are two separate pieces of work, or is that fair to say? I don't know if you can sort of comment on which one comes first as an example.
I think we made a start with it last year, looking at the policy, the council policy. Didn't get a lot of progress at the time. This year, the housing committee has been working on a couple of workshops with the community and working on an overall plan, more for them for the Sunshine Coast. So this was I think for sure the policy was on the books to take a look at based on the outcome of the process with the housing committee. The zoning bylaw is one of the supporting pieces that also needs to happen. Could be done in conjunction, could be done first policy and then the zoning bylaw. But I think you definitely need a policy for sure, because without the policy you don't really know how you want to set up your zoning bylaw. And with the zoning bylaw there's also a couple of other items actually that are relating to the official community plan that we updated. There's a couple of other items that need to be addressed there as well. We were planning to take a start of that this year. I haven't gotten to it just yet, but but it's definitely something that as staff I think we're very interested to work on that and get a more up-to-date policy in place that also has a zoning policy, zoning bylaw regulations that support policy. Yeah.
Councillor Lumley, because I haven't talked to you about your meeting with Matt and Councillor White, I would agree, like, you know, I think, thank you for bringing it back up, because I remember we kind of circled around it last year and then it didn't get very far. So, to me, it makes sense to put forward a policy change with Matt's input, because it sounds like that's what we were waiting for, is for some work to be done, and that's what I kept waiting for through the committee, and so that it all kind of works, and then to give staff direction again for, you know, as it fits into their work plan, to kind of bring it back for some of these more specific things that Andre is talking about. So if that's what you're, you know, if that's what you're talking about with Matt's input, which you might already have, I would be up for that policy change, and then to get some more of the specifics done by staff. But you're mentioning a lot of specifics right now that I'm like, that I would have to really go back and think about.
Yeah, thank you, Charlene. Matt seemed to think that the zoning bylaw was the greatest, was our biggest stumbling block right now, because it doesn't have doesn't have minimum and maximum affordable densities in it. And so part of the problem is if you read the balancing community planning, public benefits and affordable housing, if you read that guide, operating on a case-by-case basis puts you at risk, like both legally and obviously developers are think differently about developments in the town. So not only legally, but, and I think we've already seen it in place here, because you've got one developer who had inevitably, or didn't have to pay anything into affordable housing at the end of the day, and now you've got a new development who's mentioning the same thing, that he wants to be treated fairly, and he wants to be treated exactly like Soames Place. So I know Tim Lang's already expressed you know, the fact that they didn't pay into our fund at all, or any affordable housing fund. So to me, it's just kind of going sideways. And I don't know, I guess we could wait for, you know, I've been to a number of the affordable housing, I'm obviously a liaison, I guess we could wait, but you know what? We could wait forever if we didn't just, you know, come up with a policy. I'm not saying it has to be, it can't be, it's not like a coast-wide thing. I just think that, you know, right now we're just like, you know, we're just flailing in the wind here with a policy that doesn't meet like what the province is saying to do. Ours doesn't meet that. And if you look at the numbers, and because of the lack of density, like because we don't have these things in place, if you look at the numbers, Parkland, and I'm not sure because we don't measure density, I guess specifically, but Parkland actually contributes more, or at least on the books, like in here, and I just pulled off the figures from our committee, the whole meeting on December 9th, than the George. So, I mean, it just kind of confuses me sometimes when you look at somebody who has a, you know, who's going to build a 6-story residential unit there, right? Like with maximum density, and then you have somebody that might have minimum density, or because they're smaller units and they're spread over a larger place, like, and they're going to pay more than somebody who's actually got permission to build like a more density in a smaller space, you know, in a prime real estate. Is paying less than the people at Parkland would have to contribute to affordable housing fund. Just, you know, to me, it just, I don't know. Sometimes I get frustrated if I'm part of something that doesn't make sense, you know, because like it's just strange to me. So.
Welcome to town council.
Councillor Lumley, you did get Matt's input, and that's all I was asking. So, you know, thank you for clarifying that. And I think Andre actually just had it.
Andre,
I think Soames Place, there's some misunderstanding there. I had some discussions around that with Mr. Lang as well. Soames Place didn't do nothing. Soames Place provided us with market units in an affordable range below $240,000. And that was the reason for council a while ago to forego the particular restriction we had in mind. We also had this kind of gentleman's agreement that in the future they would give us some cash, but in that particular project they had two units that were assessed below $240,000, which is an affordable unit. Some other projects in town, like the George, are not providing that price range. However, we do have one of the few things that is clear in our policy right now, is it says 10% of all the units if you rezone to a higher density. So it's a very clear direction on the number of units in a given project. For the George, that number is 4. For Seagrass, it would be 1. For Soames Place, it was 2. For Parkland, it was 4 or 5, depending on how many phases you fit in. And then based on that, that's where the creativity comes in so far, is that, okay, we're talking about a number of units for a given project. What does it mean? In Parkland, it means probably build units for a particular price point. In Soames Place, it was already part of their market units anyway. In the case of the George, they're putting forward a cash contribution proposal. Seagrass is still thinking about it.
That's the problem, sorry to interrupt, but that's the problem with this, is that it's based on the market, which the province is saying it shouldn't be.
Yeah, the province has a particular take on that, and it's not as clear cut in legislation what you can do or can't do. I think that the strength of our policy is that it does allow for flexibility, because obviously a waterfront location should be treated differently than a place like Soames Place perhaps. On the other hand, it also really results in a lot of uncertainty, because what are you up to then? If a developer wants to apply for an application, you don't really know what you're up to until you get to talk to me or talk to council and get a sense. So it's definitely up for improvement, but I just want to make note of it that some people out there feel that in this particular case Soames Place got a free ride. I don't think that was the case at all. I think they worked within our policies framework.
Did they write a check?
No, they haven't at this point.
They're offering units below $240,000.
Okay.
No, I feel.
Yeah, so, but I think what your point is, though, is that you want to get this sort of policy discussion back on track, right?
Yeah. So, and no disrespect to the Sunshine Community Housing, but I think as far as the coast-wide goes, and I know they discuss a lot of things. I'm not sure I want to wait for, for the board to kind of guide us. I think we should just take initiative and do what we think's right for Gibsons.
Councilor Larry,
I just gotta be honest, and I still don't really understand this issue, and talking about it like this is getting me there, but we're talking about guidance documents that I haven't read. I mean, we did talk about a workshop. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing, but having all this information kind of sequentially laid out, these are our options, this is what we can do. I absolutely agree we need to do take some definitive action, but I'd like to start from the beginning with this, because it's still elusive for me, and so I mean, I know there's staff resources required for a workshop, but it can be pretty basic, some bullet points on what the province thinks, what we've experienced, and et cetera. So.
Excuse me, man, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know, do I need this mic? I guess so.
Yeah.
Okay. So how many families can we step up and say the town's actually put them into an affordable residence? Like, what's our completion rate? Like, how many successful families have we helped them get into an affordable home? What's our success rate right now?
Well, it depends, but I think depending on the housing continuum, which one solutions you're talking about, from the perspective of our policy, primarily talks about market housing, and so I'm not sort of trying to sort of be vague.
Yeah.
Also, the policy, as you know, is from 2006, when the coast was experiencing a very different set of economic conditions, and there was a different enthusiasm on what the role of local government is or is meant to be around housing, and I think some of those assumptions have proven to be, less than ideal. My sense is that council wants to sort of review the role of our local government around housing, and I still haven't answered your question. And a part of the challenge, council, is that it's not that straightforward of a question, and I don't think even in 2006 was ever our intention to connect homes with people that need them. I think part of our job is more around creating the conditions so that, including by regulating developments, to make it more affordable for people to access a home.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's
I
sort
don't
of,
know.
yeah, sort of saying it
It's
just,
not really what I'm going down, but
yeah.
I hear you and I appreciate that, but, I mean, I moved here because we moved here, I could afford a home. I couldn't afford a home with kids, right? I can't afford $1 million home. But, again, you guys probably know me by now, it would just be nice, like I talked to you, and it would just be nice to, cut the ribbon on a new development and also introduce 2 families that just moved into a couple of homes that they could actually afford through our affordable housing policy, you know what I mean? And I think it's gonna be done, it can be done, but, I mean, pushing it off and waiting, I'm just not that kind of person, so maybe this is the part of that arrow that goes backwards. So, I don't know, I mean, maybe this is the Russian doll again. But anyway, I'd just like to, move forward with it. We can have a workshop and keep discussing it. But I mean, if everybody wants to read that and get a feel for it, I think it makes complete sense.
You're referring to what, the amenity policy?
Yeah, the community amenity
Yeah.
contributions.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. They dissuade you from what's called the lift, which is based on market, and albeit they could give you an affordable unit at $204,000 for 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. I don't know how many families are moving into that type of environment, right? Everybody now wants cash, and then these guys, affordable housing people with the community land trust, that's what they want cash. Because if the United Church gives the land trust part of their land and they can service it for 2 homes, conceivably, I know Matt's been working with Barry Maydell at Click, conceivably they could drop a 3-bedroom home on it for around $120,000. So, which then your funds would come out of your pool, your affordable. So anyway, I just think there's an easy way and there's a simple way, but a couple things have to be changed first, and I'd just like to work on it. That's all I'm really saying. And do it. I'd like to do it as soon as possible instead of waiting.
Okay. Stay there. And if I can, so I've already emailed you, thanks to technology, that guide that Councillor Lumley is speaking of. There was some paper, it was mailed a couple of years ago, but anyway, it's been emailed to you. Andre and myself will review the planning department's workload. Between now and mid-October, it's pretty tight. But we'll get the strong sense from you that you want to make that a priority, and unless I hear otherwise, we will make that a priority.
Yeah, even Matt seemed to think that if we just got the densities into our zoning bylaw, it'll go a long way. I mean, Seychelles already done it, right? Like they're ahead of us on this one, so, and their strategic plan's already out too, so, I don't know, you get tired of being the caboose, right? You want to be the engine.
Well, maybe it's also got no senior staff whatsoever.
Councillor Larry.
Maybe it's more than a workshop, maybe it's a report with some very distinct options that we can talk about at a committee of the whole. I mean, maybe we can put it on the next possible committee of the whole agenda. Sounds to me like there's some really distinct paths that we could choose.
Councillor White?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think this is a matter of scheduling, really. I heard our Director of Planning say it's been a priority for staff, and I think it's definitely a priority for council, and I completely agree with the sense of importance that Councillor Lumley's bringing up, and whether it's a workshop to move forward or a proposal to change the bylaw to move forward, or a new policy, a new proposed policy. I think I'd just like to see some kind of date that we can move, and I don't think waiting for the housing committee is going to work. I mean, I think that we need to do something that complements their work, and my understanding is that their message actually is that I went to a workshop in May, I think, and the message there was each municipality, each local government is going to have their own approach, but they were letting us know about what they were doing so that hopefully our approach can complement theirs, and that I think is crucial to moving forward. That we need to work with the land trust, but I don't think we should wait for another community workshop. I think maybe we should have actually a town of Gibson's step that we can commit to, and that would get us past our previous discussion back in January or December, whenever it was, when the workshop idea first came up, and just haven't been able to move forward with it. So I'd like to see some kind of tangible date that we can look forward to.
Okay, so, I don't know, can we sort of leave that with just you bring it forward to whatever we can. I mean, the reality, quite frankly, is I don't have to tell you, our staff has been totally, and they will be until at least October 2nd, probably even beyond that, but there's just not been a whole lot of time for some things that we would like to get to. But we will make sure that you come forward with some suggestions for a very near future to get this on a committee of the whole meeting. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so if there's nothing else, we can put a break here before council tonight. Motion to adjourn, Councilor Sanjay.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick question, can certainly after adjournment. I just want to get a sense from you whether this format worked for your the slides that you had.
Sign off, Councilor Valerian second, so all in favor, so we're adjourned. But yes, okay.